hold. Good evening. We're going to tell you what we know and what we don't know tonight as a worrisome new COVID variant rears its head. Labeled with the Greek letter Omicron and classified by the WHO as a variant of concern. Today, the U.S. announcing restrictions on travel to here from southern Africa, where the variant is spreading. Experts troubled by the variant's large number of mutations. While there are early indications it could be more transmissible than previous variants, it's not known if it's more deadly and if it can weaken the effectiveness of vaccines. Uncertainty rattling financial markets today as the U.S. averages 90,000 new COVID infections a day. In a moment, some of my conversation with Dr. Fauci about the Omicron variant. But first, Gabe Gutierrez with the latest.
Tonight, concern over a new highly transmissible COVID variant, first identified in South Africa, is rippling across the globe. The White House imposing new restrictions on air travel from 8 countries starting on Monday. A World Health Organization panel has just named the strain Omicron and classified it as a variant of concern.
This variant has a large number of mutations, and some of these mutations have some worrying characteristics.
President Biden saying he was briefed by his COVID response team this morning.
We don't know a lot about the variant except that it is of great concern. It seems to spread rapidly.
Today, the WHO convened an emergency meeting but cautioned against an overreaction. Still, from Asia to Europe to the U.S., stocks tumbled. The Dow plunging more than 900 points.
You'll be waiting for the test return results.
Passengers on this flight from South Africa were told of new restrictions before arriving in the Netherlands.
People are getting more and more anxious. They want to get tested. They want to go home. How long this is going to take, we don't know.
Today, Belgium was the first European nation to confirm a case. Around the world, a growing list of countries are now limiting travel from southern Africa. Though more study is needed, experts warn that Omicron might be more resistant to vaccines.
South African epidemiologists think that this is more transmissible than the Delta variant.
What is the likelihood that this variant is already in the U.S.?
It's already here. Unfortunately, we now know from previous variants that by the time we pick it up in Africa's and in the European Union, it is already likely.
All this comes as the U.S. just crossed another sobering milestone in the pandemic. More than 780,000 American lives lost. There's also a surge in new cases nationwide, an average of more than 90,000 new infections each day.
We are now bearing the brunt of delayed wave. Delta has really knocked us for a loop.
But on this Thanksgiving weekend, air travel is back to almost pre-pandemic levels. The TSA screening more than 2.3 million passengers on Wednesday.
This is our first plane, travel trip using an airline since the pandemic hit.
So let's go back to this variant right now. I think a lot of us want to know if those shots we got are going to work. What are the manufacturers of those shots?
Well, Lester, Pfizer, Moderna, and J&J all say they're already testing their vaccines against this variant. Pfizer is expecting results back within 2 weeks or so, but says that its vaccine may require an adjustment if this variant keeps spreading, Lester.
All right, Gabe Gutierrez, thank you. Earlier, I spoke to Dr. Anthony Fauci about the new variant, and I began by asking what is so concerning about it.
Well, it has a constellation of mutations, Lester, around that spike protein, which would be strongly indicative that this will be highly transmissible and might, in fact, escape some of the immune parameters, such as monoclonal antibodies and the convalescent serum and plasma when people recover, and likely even some protection from the antibodies that are induced by vaccination. So we're taking it very, very seriously. It's spreading really quite rapidly in South Africa, and then we're seeing cases popping up in countries around, particularly when there's been travel from South Africa or southern African countries to other places like Israel and places like that. And for that reason, the president decided prudently to put the travel restriction on not only to South Africa, but to 7 other countries that border South Africa.
Is what you're seeing right now the kind that keeps you up at night?
You don't want to frighten the American public, but when something occurs that you need to take seriously, you take it seriously and you do whatever you can to mitigate against that. I mean, I'm saying this absolutely clearly. that if ever there was a reason for unvaccinated people to get vaccinated, and for those who have been vaccinated, when your time comes up, to go and get a booster shot, because even though there may be some diminution, and we don't know that in the protection against the vaccine, certainly to be vaccinated and boosted is always better than not to be. So that's the first thing. The second thing is what the president has decided to do. He's taking it very seriously, and that's the reason for the restrictions from travel from certain countries.
You talk about the booster shots, then the renewed importance of booster shots. How much edge do they give you?
The booster shots give you a very, very important edge. If you look at the level of these protective antibodies following the peak response after 2 doses and compare the level following the peak response after the 3rd booster dose of an mRNA, it's multiple times higher after the 3rd shot of an mRNA.
How long after this weekend would you expect to see the impact in terms of infection numbers of this holiday?
Well, whenever you have a congregate situation where people travel, it's usually measured in a few weeks, 2 to 3 weeks or more. When you're talking about infection, it's about 2 weeks or so. When you're talking about if anybody gets severe disease, it's always lagging indicator of hospitalization and death. We hope that people, when they travel, they're careful so that we don't see a major spike.
I don't want to put the words in your mouth, but are we at a dangerous turn right now in this pandemic with this new variant?
Well, we have to be paying close attention and take it very seriously. I don't really want to go so far as to say we're at a dangerous turn. We don't have enough information, Lester, to make that determination. But what we can do is do everything we can to make sure we err on the side of safety. And that's the reason why you're seeing the travel restriction and the renewed emphasis on getting people vaccinated and boosted.
Some of my conversation earlier with Dr. Fauci. There is breaking news out of Durham, North